welcome to our panel on design entrepreneurship. My name is Khoi Vinh, I'm principal designer at Adobe, and I've got a great panel here today to talk all about designer co-founders. I'm going to start right here on my left with Tiffany Chu. Do you want to say a little bit about who you are and what you're doing?
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Tiffany Chu. I am a designer and a co-founder at Remix. My background is in architecture and urban planning, and then moved into UX design. Worked at Zipcar for a few years in Boston as their first UX hire, and then moved to San Francisco to work at a nonprofit called Code for America. And Remix actually came out of a project while I was doing a fellowship at Code for America, and now we help cities plan public transit.
Great. And we have Choi from Baron Fig.
Hey everybody, my name is Joey Cofone. I am one of the co-founders of Baron Fig, along with the amazing Adam Cornfield. And my background is in design, literature, and philosophy, I suppose you could say. Did a lot of interesting things that all kind of came together in Baron Fig, mostly a lot of writing and running a design studio, which is how we eventually came to launch a notebook company for designers and creativity.
And we have Tricia Troy from Movewith.
Hi, I'm really excited to be here. I'm the co-founder of Movewith with my partner Holly Shelton. My background is as a designer, an artist, and a dancer and a yoga teacher. And all those things seem really disparate, but they came together when I met my partner and we decided to create a platform to help people get fitter and healthier and happier. So it's a platform that lets you connect to the best coaches through audio classes that you can take on the go.
And finally we have Enrique Allen from DesignerFund.
Cool. Stoked to be with you guys. Hey everybody, my name is Enrique. I'm one of the co-founders along with Ben Blumenfeld of DesignerFund, and we invest in early stage companies that have design as part of their DNA, like Stripe and Gusto and Remix and many others. And previously I was a designer within venture capital firms at Venrock, at Facebook Fund, where I ran small in-house design team to do short sprints with companies like Lyft and Wildfire and others, and actually invested in Behance, and really happy to be here today and use this product on the platform.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. So the purpose of today's panel is sort of to do a gut check on where we are in the journey, so to speak, of this idea of designers as founders, as co-founders. And so I think I'd just like to start the conversation by asking you guys to sort of comment on when you first considered founding or co-founding a business, because everybody on this panel basically started as a designer, right? Now, did you always know you're going to do this, or did you eventually come to this idea that, hey, this is going to make sense for me to do to accomplish what I need to accomplish? I'll throw it out to you, Tricia.
I think that the pathway to being an entrepreneur is the moment you become a designer. Because as a designer, I was always helping people understand what their core brand values were, translate that into something that's marketable, and always helping them answer is who's my user, what is this for, what is this worth? So basically all of these things are things that you need to start a business at all. For me, the moment when I realized I needed to take that leap was when I realized that I'd honed my skills in starting brands and companies. I've been part of so many startups. I realized that that was my medium, and it was time for me to take my core brand values and build something that I uniquely believe in.
Right.
So is being a designer a version of an entrepreneur?
I believe it completely, yes. In order to be a good designer, in order to do more than just decorate, you have to understand the problem completely.
Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to co-found a business, but you can bring an entrepreneurial approach to the work that you do.
Yeah.
And that's some of the approach that you guys take at DesignerFund, right? It's not that you're trying to turn every designer into a co-founder, right?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yeah, we've been lucky to work with a lot of designers as entrepreneurs, some as CEOs, and some as founders of companies who are still very product focused. And I actually don't think that designers necessarily should be CEOs. unless they have other great co-founders to support them in doing that. And then for me, I think one of the insights that came to me around DesignerFund, literally one day while meditating, was I was spending all my time and energy trying to make startups more design-oriented and more human-centered, and I just realized that I couldn't personally scale. There's no way that I could go to every single company that we invested in and help encourage them to do more research, to be more empathetic, et cetera. So I thought, instead of spending all this time making startups more design-oriented, what if I flipped that and spent more time helping designers become entrepreneurs, with the thesis being that if they get involved early on with great engineers and business partners, they're more likely to lead and model those values and continue to scale the company, rather than trying to add design as a tack on later after the company is way established.
Right. And Joe, you are CEO of Baron Fig, is that right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. We had to go through a phase where we were exploring the option of raising money.
Yeah.
From guys like you, and really, super beautiful missions and whatnot. And we had to delineate roles. It's a very odd thing to be, CEO of a small company. It's so different than a huge enterprise. So formally, yeah. But really, we're co-founders, Adam and myself. Right. And we're part of a team that works together.
So it wasn't until that you had to actually present yourself formally to an investor community that you had to formalize that role.
Right. Yeah. Otherwise, I don't think it would have come up for a very long time.
Right.
Because CEO seems to be, although this was a couple of years ago when CEO did have different connotations than I think it does even now.
Yeah.
Where here we are trying to discussing designers as CEOs and entrepreneurs, and when we started Baron Fig, that was not on the table.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I want to get back to that. I actually would love to do a check for how today's environment compares to a few years ago, but I actually want to also get your story in as well. How did you first come to understand the opportunity of co-founding and know that it was right for you?
I feel like it was not a single moment. It was more like a bunch of us, we were working in the government space, and we were doing these prototypes, and all of a sudden one of the prototypes that we were working on, which was a little thing where you can drag and drop a bus route on a map and basically have the community suggest better bus routes to their city. And for us it was Muni in San Francisco. That went viral. And then all of a sudden we got all these emails from other planners in cities around the world saying, hey, I want to use this for my long-range plan or my community engagement strategy or blah, blah, blah. And I think we were so surprised and shocked and almost taken aback by the response from this prototype that we had built, that before we knew it, we were trying to work on it in nights and weekends. And then after our fellowship ended, we wanted to keep working on it, but we didn't really have a way to be full-time on it. There was no one paying us, and so we were like, oh, we have to start our own entity and become self-sustaining if we wanted to keep working on this. So that's how we fell into it.
And did you feel like there was lots of information out there to help you come to that decision and figure that out for yourself? What year was this?
This was at the end of 2014, so about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Kind of recent.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, there were enough people in, I guess, the communities that I was in the Bay Area who had tried to start startups.
Sure.
Some failed, some didn't. There was a kind of a path.
Yeah, you can't not meet somebody, right?
Yeah. Everybody, you go to a coffee shop, everyone's talking about their business.
Yeah.
Kind of annoying sometimes.
Yeah.
But it was a well-trodden enough path that I had seen friends be successful, friends who were designers and most people who weren't designers, that I was like, okay, we'll give it a go.
Yeah. So it really does seem that this idea of designers having opportunities as co-founders, starting companies, this is well understood. It's out there. Do we think that this has come a really long way over the past 5 years? Do we think that there are more designers than ever looking to do this today, or from your your interactions with the startup community, let's do a temperature check to see what you see out there from other folks who might be embarking on this.
I think Enrique should answer this.
Yeah, Enrique.
So I think overall, to your point, more people are aware of designer founders because of successful companies like Airbnb and Pinterest and Instagram and many others. So there's more awareness for sure. But if you walk up and down Sand Hill Road, where most investors are in New York, the majority of investors don't have design backgrounds or don't necessarily focus on design. So there's still a big gap in terms of the resources that are actually available. And NEA recently did a survey of about 400 companies, 300 venture-backed and 100 agencies, and about 30% had designers as part of the founding team. So I think there is a trend towards more founders coming to us saying, hey, we recognize design is important, but we actually don't know how to do it. So I think we're still at the awareness phase, but there's still a big gap between the actual implementation and the nuance of how to successfully do that.
Anecdotally, I can say that there's been a lot of inbound interest because of the fact that design is part of our DNA. And since we're a consumer company, the investment firms that are interested in building brands have actually been more receptive to us. And I do know a time when I first started in this field when design was this funny little thing that happened sometimes.
After the fact.
If at all, after the fact. And now it's the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, when I started design at School of Visual Arts in New York City, I started as an illustration major. I didn't even know there was a thing called a designer, a graphic designer. And that concept never entered my mind. I started when I was 22. My teacher had introduced it to me, and then I fell in love. But things have come a long way.
But had you, I mean, we talked like a week or two ago, and you said that you had been thinking about the idea of a company even before you went to college, right? Like, do you see what you were studying as a potential means to that end?
I think that independence was always the goal, and like the means is financial freedom and probably being your own boss. And my original solution was to have a design studio and just take my laptop anywhere and work, which I did for a while. And then Baron Fig kind of happened by accident. We started on Kickstarter just on a whim, and the reaction was so ridiculous that we kind of put everything on hold and chased it. It's like a shooting star. You have to go.
So, what kind of designer makes for a good founder or co-founder? I mean, in your experience, what have you found that you had to adjust about your approach, or new skills that you had to acquire?
I think for me, the skills that I've noticed as the most important for me and I actually have another designer co-founder and two other engineering co-founders, and I think that the skill set is the lack of fear when jumping into a completely new domain that you haven't done before, and being willing to just try it even though we might fail. So for example, early on we realized we were trying to get cities as customers, and that involves something called sales, which I had never done before. It's super intimidating. So me and my co-founders, we needed to take a sales one-on-one class so we could figure out what it was, how to do it, how to talk about it. It was really awkward. And now, I mean, we have a team who is trained in this that does it, but it was scary, and things like marketing and hiring a VP and executive search, all this stuff is new. You would never learn it in design school. So, I don't know, fearlessness?
I think this connects what you guys were saying, which is the design is sort of like a type of entrepreneurial philosophy, and then what you're saying is the fearlessness, right? Because when we design, I think a good designer, by nature, has to go where they haven't been, and going into the unknown is scary. And still, like, I've been doing it for a while, and every time I start a new project, I'm afraid. Like, I'm okay saying that I'm afraid, but being able to ignore it, like what you're saying, is a huge part of not just being a designer, but being an entrepreneur and saying, I'm going to go do this not just for design, but for like this entire large-scale endeavor.
Yeah. Tricia?
I think that the most valuable skill that a designer can bring to the table, in my experience, has been the ability, much like what you articulated, the ability to believe that something's possible. No matter what level the project might be, from branding to prototyping to imagining a new infrastructure for getting goods to a user, the designer counterpart is ready and needs to be ready to dream that up. And our responsibility is to articulate that vision either through graphics, through motion graphics, through the crazy things that you did at Adobe with the intro, you know? And what another skill that you need to have is the ability to go deep and the ability to go shallow. So basically meet your audience. If your audience needs no more than a napkin drawing to understand, then you can stop there, and you should stop there. You shouldn't keep going because it's your craft. But if you have the opportunity to take it deeper, then go all the way there with the insane title opening sequence of this conference. I mean, it was really, really neat to see. Not everyone who's watching this can see that, you know, the handmade paper cranes. So it's handmade. You didn't have to go any crazier. I saw the paper, I saw the folds, I saw the hand touch. The opening sequence, without knowing the backstory, I thought it was all done through digital because it was so perfect. And to then find out that it was all done by hand, experimentation, play, all of that, it reminded me of the Adobe brand values, which I've never read, but I intuited immediately from back in the day when the first box software that I had those beautiful x-rays of leaves. I don't know if you all remember that. And then I remembered like the core value of the company itself. So I think a truly valuable design counterpart for entrepreneurship is someone who can understand what the moment needs and be able to be fearless to the level that's called for.
So Enrique, I want to sort of piggyback on this and ask you actually a question from the audience. What kind of designer founder do you back, or what kind of traits do you look for? And is it about product or service, or its marketability, or some other combination of factors?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I appreciate whoever asked that. I think first and foremost, we look for the team, right? Is there a critical mass of design, engineering, and business skills in that core team, or do they have a plan to bring on other early founding members to complement their skill set? So I think that's fundamental. You know, we've had examples, you know, bridging to your previous question, where teams over-index on design and sweat the wrong details. And that's, I think, is something critical for a founder to recognize. For example, we had some founders that were really getting into the minutia of these custom icons, but they haven't even shipped an alpha app to test with users. And then they kept polishing and polishing until it was too late, and they ran out of money. And so I think it's important, we have a lot more awareness now to make sure to find designers who aren't too precious, and to piggyback on what you're saying, that can zoom into the micro details when it's needed, especially early on. Designer founders need to help define the product and the strategy and the roadmap, but also be able to kind of zoom out at the systems and org level. So I think that zooming in and zooming out is a really important ability that founders need to cultivate. And over time, we want to see folks who are not only obsessed about designing a great product or service or experience, but ultimately designing an organization that designs great products and services. So I think if you're excited in doing that and not afraid to delegate and let go of some of those responsibilities, then we'd definitely love to talk to you. And we've seen designers from all different backgrounds, from self-taught, from architecture, from engineering backgrounds, from graphic design backgrounds, from industrial design backgrounds. So there's no one path to be a designer founder. We've seen them all, and they can all be, I think, successful.
Yeah, that tension between, do I want to focus on designing a product or a solution, or do I want to focus on creating an organization, designing an organization or a company? It's similar to, often designers go through a transition from being sort of individual contributors to being managers. It's not exactly the same, but did you guys have this experience where maybe the thing that drew you to design was, oh, I love to do design, but then you realize, actually, I need to step out of it in order to get the design opportunities that I want to get?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I think when I first started Baron Fig, my goal was to create my dream job, which was to design notebooks and other paper paraphernalia and tools for thinkers all day, every day. I love it. And our limited editions are like, it doesn't have anything to do about the notebook. It's like, we have one, I mean, we did one with Khoi, which was just out there. We've done another one with jugglers on the cover. And we can really do anything. So in theory, like, it was a canvas that I created to do whatever I want. And then I gave the best job in the world for me to somebody else.
Yeah.
And now Chandler is our other designer. He's our, I guess you call him our lead designer now.
Yeah.
And the realization of having to give it away and let go, and realizing that design is, I'm not just a designer, I'm more. I have committed way before I really realized what I was committing to not being, a designer every day, all day.
Yeah.
As well.
How about you two, Tiffany?
Yeah, I mean, I think I realized it when we hired our first designer, and Dory, he's just like way better than I am at like all the things that I thought I was good at.
Yeah.
And then that was the moment where I was like, okay, I got to focus on other things. But yeah, when I think about the percentage of time that I think about design on a day-to-day basis from an IC, individual contributor perspective, it's very little. I might give feedback in design critiques, or I might, take a design and figure out how to share it with the customer to get, user research insights. But it's more about designing the organization that can scale with that, so that it's like the sum of the things is more than the individual parts. So I was sad for a while. But then I realized that what I was most excited about was actually starting new things and figuring out new products to launch in our product roadmap. So I moved from kind of this designer role to this more like kick off new things role in the company. And now we're 50, so there's many different hats that are worn across the company. And I'm probably going to have a different role a quarter from now, so come and ask me that.
Yeah.
Tricia?
Yeah. I started designing because I loved helping people articulate what their dreams were, but the key word there is helping people. And so when I became a design manager at Eventbrite, I remember having to let go of design and as a action and up-level it so that I can keep my eye on the end product as a whole, and the medium is now my team. And it was a hard transition, but I feel like doing that earned me my ability to then become a co-founder, where I had to go back into design and become a manager and do both, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 other things at the same time. But honing that skill is really important, and it reminds me of my younger days as a junior, young designer, thinking that I had to design every single piece in a layout, not wanting to use stock photography, not wanting to use what we called clip art at the time. And now, noun projects, icons are not only a godsend, they help elevate the design language immediately. There's so many tools out there created by other designers to help us design better things. And so I think that was my first step in realizing that to be a good designer means you have to stop designing everything.
Yeah. All right, so it's pretty clear that you can't design everything, but how do you guys think about steering the creative direction of the company? I mean, even that could be something that you don't have the bandwidth for, right? Maybe you see that too with the companies you work with, Enrique. It's like the designer maybe just doesn't get to do anything design related, like in a really hands-on sense, even if it means like, direct art direction, so to speak?
Yeah, well, we've seen, especially at the early days, assuming there's a CEO and an engineering lead or co-founder, designers who are part of the founding team can still very much be hands-on and build the first MVP or the first couple iterations. Evan Sharp at Pinterest, literally drink a big cup of coffee and just like code and design all day. Mikey Krager, Instagram, like single-handedly built, like back end. So it's very important for designer founders to be hands-on early on to get that product right. And in the early days, your vision, like I'm sure all of you guys have thought of things that you want to do like years ago, and you're still just executing on that vision. There's still so much more that you want to do. I find that with ourselves. So I think early on it's important that designers are hands-on until they get some product market fit, and then they can define more principles and patterns and frameworks that they can empower other people on the team to extend, build upon, make better. So that transition isn't always clean, and it happens multiple times. So for example, Joe Gebbia at Airbnb, after the company was clearly becoming successful, he would move on to future like skunk work projects, in a separate building or with a separate team, whether it's the rebrand or whether some of the architecture stuff that he's doing now. So I think what you brought up, being able to kick off and synthesize all this information is a full-time job, trying to gather all that input. And if you're like stuck in the weeds, it's very hard to collect all that information and help inform the team to really focus on what's important.
Yeah. How do you guys feel about trusting the design strategy, the creative strategy to the people that you work with? Do you ever bite your lip and say, God, that's not the way I would do it, but I have to let it be done that way?
Yeah, it happened today, this morning.
Oh, really? Okay. So recently. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's, I do have to stop myself, because then you suffocate your team and they don't feel like they have the freedom to go off and really own it. And I think that's the most important thing. If you don't have a sense of ownership on your team, then you end up having to micromanage everything. And it's shitty for you, it's shitty for your team, and it's just shitty for everyone. So yeah, this happened a little bit this morning, but I think needing to step back and saying, hey, if that little detail's not perfect in my eyes, like it's okay. I'm pretty sure the customer won't even notice. And just thinking at a bigger scale, not easy.
Either of you guys?
Yeah, that's a really good question about stepping back and when to voice your opinion, and not just design, but everything. When we started, it was the two of us doing everything, and then you let things go slowly. And I think, it's always something I'm working on, probably all of us are working on, but the ability, when someone comes to you with a problem, not to try to solve it right away, but say, what do you think we should do? And most of the time, their solution is phenomenal. It's probably better than I think, but it's easy to skip that step and just try to like hold hands, and it comes from a good place. You really have to change your thinking.
I love to work with small companies on small teams, and at that size, for me, hiring means hiring leaders, even if they don't know they're leaders yet.
Yeah.
So I don't have that problem at the size of the team we are. When I've worked on larger organizations, then my responsibility has been to own the output of everything at the end of the day. So I've needed to have those tougher conversations, but I'm in the lucky position of completely trusting the people I hire. And if I don't fully believe in something, it's my job to make sure that someone else understands that. Yeah. And if they don't understand it, they don't agree, then I have to reevaluate what it is I'm thinking of.
Right, it's more of a discussion rather than like dictating.
Yeah.
I mean, in a startup, you really have to fully trust everybody who's on the team, right? Like, if there's someone that you can't trust, then that's a major problem.
Yeah. Right? No management book is going to solve it for you. There.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I think the one thing I can't remember who told me at the very beginning of starting the company is Your job as a founder is to make yourself as redundant as possible in every single realm.
Right.
And so I have to remember that so I don't get my fingers into too anything.
Right. So how redundant are you?
I don't know, because that's my team.
Let's pull on that thread a little bit more about teams. So now that you're a founder or co-founder, has your view of what makes for a good candidate to hire, what makes for a good portfolio, has that changed? Is it different?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we focus on helping build and scale design teams. So we've literally seen teams at the smallest stage. There's only one designer to 2 to 5 to 10 to 30, 40. And so there's a lot of nuance over time. Early on, it's really important that in our experience that you find designers who can run end-to-end with experiences and be able to also play some of the PM role and be able to interact directly with the engineering lead. And then over time, as the company scales, you tend to get the opportunity to have more specialists, folks who can focus on illustration or animation or just UI engineering. So I think early on, it's really important to understand how someone thinks about a problem. Oftentimes, we'll see portfolios and see really beautiful, like dribble shots and whatnot, but it's really unclear. What was the context? What was the problem that they were trying to solve? What were some of the iterations? What happened? And the results, the actual impact. And if they had more time, what would they do differently in the future? I understand that it takes a lot of time and people don't want to keep their portfolios updated, so I get that. But really digging into that systematic thinking, I think, is really critical, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult for that person to collaborate with engineers, PMs, other disciplines. So that's something that we really focus on, is their decision-making process.
Right. How about you guys? What's hiring? What lens do you look through when you hire now that you're, managing these companies?
For designers or just anyone?
Designers particularly.
I think, like Enrique is saying, depth of thinking, and just breadth of not only how does my design apply, but how does that apply in production and marketing and the finance of the company and the timeline as a whole. So designers who are able to not think in just design world is really important. And have an appreciation and a respect, not only to understand production, but to be able to really appreciate what the other person does, and vice versa for the guy in production. That we're not just making pretty pictures, but we're doing something that he can't do.
Right.
I didn't realize until you asked this question that lately I've been looking for people who may not have come from design. Some of my more successful hires are people who came from social work or finance or marketing, and really always had the heart and soul of a designer. And the reason why they've been great partners for me is that I have basically been looking for people I would be happy to co-found a company with if the circumstances were different, that I really do trust. I trust more than they trust themselves. That I can actually nudge them and say, can you solve this problem for me? And they will run off and do it.
So actually, from the audience, Neska asks, is a portfolio the best way to evaluate that level of trustworthiness, or is it something else?
Okay, for me, I make sure that the portfolio is there. It needs to exist, and it needs to
minimum requirement.
Yeah, minimum requirement. The vibe needs to be consistent, so I can understand who you are. I need to know who you are. I don't need you to be able to emulate something. I don't want you to come on board and fake it and be miserable for several years. I also really look for the storytelling. A design on its own doesn't tell the whole context of how it was created, who you worked with, did you respect your team members, et cetera, et cetera. It's really hard to get noticed if the work was done in isolation. That's why just, imaginary work doesn't usually capture my attention. However, I have hired an incredible designer where half of her portfolio was made up, but I could understand her thought process because she wrote it out. Another thing I look for is the ability to read instructions. I always ask for a cover letter, not because I care what's written in it, but are you going to do it? Is it going to be custom to this job posting? You could even call out, you probably don't really want this cover letter, but here it is because you asked for it, and I would.
That applies for every employer, right?
Yeah.
The ability to follow instructions, yeah.
It's a timely topic because the product designer hire, that opening that we have in our team is probably like the most difficult and most contentious one in our whole company. I think it's because we have designer founders evaluating this product design hire. And our, oh my God. I think our evaluation candidate process has really evolved over the past 2 years, and we've figured out that the most important thing is for a designer to have owned, not fully owned, because I mean that's not always possible, but to have worked on and designed a product that has been used by real world users for an amount of time where they had to make design changes to that for the real world users. Because I think there's a lot of portfolios out there that are very surfacey and prototypey and very dribbly, but unless you've had to like interact, talk to your user and be like, what do you think and why does this work or doesn't work, and make changes based on that, then it's hard to find that in a designer, and that's where we're at right now.
Just as only certain designers are going to have the particular makeup required to co-found a company, is it fair to say that only certain kinds of designers are going to have the makeup to be part of like an early stage company? Would you say that's true, or something that's adaptable?
That Enrique was talking about.
First designers.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like we're starting to define that more because it is a particular type of person where maybe they've been at a big company where they maybe don't have as much ownership, and but they have the experience of making hard decisions and trade-offs and iterating with data. But now they're at the point where they want to lead something from the ground up. So, but they got to be willing to take the risk and maybe the brand and the career. They're gonna work for a company that maybe not their parents don't know or their friends don't know about, etc. So it's almost like they're a founder or entrepreneur, more like an intrapreneur.
Yeah. They're part of the founding team.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a really important, critical role. So it's probably like the universe of all designers. There's like a small bit that are like founders, a little bit small, and then a little bit more maybe first designers, and then kind of so on. But it's still, I think, overall a small percentage of the folks that we come across.
So I want to ask about a little bit more about what makes designer founders unique, or designers at startups unique or different from designers in other environments. And I want to ask this question this way. I want to see if to what extent do you think it's true that the designers who are willing to go on these journeys to build these companies, to what extent are these people interested in questions that are different from what another founder at another startup would be, right? Are designers actually tackling different kinds of problems than an engineer co-founder or a sales co-founder? I mean, I would almost say, like, to some extent, all of your companies do that, right? You're focused on problems that maybe other disciplines might not tackle in the same way. Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think being a designer means we probably have certain common interests, and so then we also see common problems.
Yeah.
So when a certain profession is maybe elevated or respected into a leadership role, then those problems probably become elevated or respected. So to answer your question, yes, I think as we designers continue to do that, we'll see more design-related problems being solved and having more attention in general. Is that the right thing?
Yeah.
Cool.
What do you guys think?
I think, so Remix, we sit in the civic tech world, so we're designing technology for local governments. And traditionally it's a very unsexy space, like no one wants to design for government because it's government. And I think the new way that we're approaching it is it's got so much opportunity for design love and design help and like user research and human-centered design, which had never been really part of how government operates.
Yeah.
That I think the type of designer that you need to want to be in this field is you got to care about impact. You got to care about the people that the local government serves, which is everybody. It's not selective in who government serves. It has to be everybody, especially local government. And if you don't necessarily care about that impact, then you're probably not going to be a good fit for the work that we're doing.
So do you think this is a problem that is being tackled in a way that's different because you're designer co-founders?
Yeah, I think I look at the other companies in our space, and a lot of them have been around for a long time, like big enterprise legacy companies. And obviously, I think they don't take user research as seriously as we do.
Right.
And that's like literally the first step of what we do with every customer that we bring on, is that layer of research. And I think it's very a design specific thing.
I'm just going to give an example. Last night, here at the hotel, we have a TV in the bathroom. I don't have a TV in the bathroom at home. I don't really want a TV in the bathroom, but we have it. And
like above the jacuzzi, like where is it? I haven't seen it.
It's small. It's like a 13-inch. Yeah, right? It's above the sink, right? And I started,
but it's not in view of the toilet, which is really where it should be.
Yes, and it's not in my bathroom. It's not in view of the tub if you're laying the way the incline suggests.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so that was the first thing. I was talking to my fiance about the angles, and she was like, I wouldn't think of that until I laid in the tub. And so that's probably along the lines of the way we think is, the aesthetics matter, the way human beings interact matters, and those problems come up naturally.
I'm trying to figure out if I can answer that question, but I can't right now because the organization that is Movewith is pretty design focused, because I'm a designer and my co-founder comes from Apple, and we have an incredible product designer, and somehow most of the people we hired either care deeply about design or are literally studying the tools to become designers in some ways in their life. So I think basically, since we're a consumer-driven product and we really need to earn the right to be on your phone for you to use our product every day, and because
I just used it today.
Yes.
Meditating.
Yes. And our product itself is requires you to change your behavior a little bit. We want you to move every day. We want you to meditate, be in your body, all of that. This is stuff that's a luxury that wasn't necessarily talked about as much years ago. Fitness used to be more of this thing that some people did, and now needing to be in your body, meditating or moving in some way is something that most people think about. So we need design-minded people to work in marketing, design, of course, even engineering. Our engineers are almost more opinionated about design than designers. And we need that because it's so noisy now. You can't build products where that connection to humans, which is design, that's that layer, that has to be baked all the way into the product experience at every touch point.
So I think those are great answers, but I want to press a little bit further, because what I'm really asking is, if you have designer co-founders out there who are building companies that would have been built anyway by other kinds of co-founders, are we really adding anything to the overall landscape, to the conversation? We're really adding unique value. And I'll give you an example. One of the co-founders at Kickstarter, Charles Adler, was a designer, like a really, really great designer. And I think that played a big role in Kickstarter being focused on solving a very unique kind of problem, or what seemed like a very unique kind of problem, which is like, how do you fund really ambitious but not necessarily immediately business-worthy creative opportunities, right? And I think Kickstarter directly resulted from having a designer co-founder who helped form that thesis, right? So, I mean, what's your take? I mean, our designer is this new wave of designer co-founders? Is it going to mean new kinds of companies tackling different kinds of problems?
I can actually answer that question.
question.
Okay.
I'm not going to name names, but in the space of fitness, there are many products, and if you were to download our app and use it for a little while, and download some competitive apps, you'll just see where the point of view comes from. It's baked into the experience that we are out there to decommoditize the fitness instructor, the wellness instructor.
Okay.
We're out there to decommoditize you as a consumer, so everything is about really connecting humans. And there are other products out there where it's a library, it's an app that you want to get, you're almost tricked into downloading.
Like a marketplace.
Yeah. So I think that having a designer in the founding team, or that sensibility, there are some CEOs that are part of designer founder guilds that they just have that design sensibility. To have that means that the product has more humanity to it, honestly. That's what I've experienced.
Yeah, maybe one way to think about that is in every industry and with every new technology, there's a natural progression from first it functioning to you think of like where Bitcoin or digital currencies are, like it works, but it's not very usable. Most people don't have access to these currencies, for example, or to these tools that are very developer centric. And then the industry or the technology matures and it becomes more usable, and then eventually it becomes more mature and it's like delightful, and the end-to-end experiences that you're talking about are really robust, etc. So I think depending on the technology and the market, designer founders can have a big delta in the improvement. So for Remix, like literally the previous cities were planning with like pen and paper and laying out maps. So their team, and there's competitors out there that have existed for many years who didn't solve that problem. And then Remix comes along and puts that all online with an API, etc. Similarly with more of our companies like Omada Health, which is helping prevent people from getting diabetes. Like pharmaceutical pills existed and these in-person classes existed, but it wasn't until this team out of IDEO took a more human-centered approach. So I think the delta there can be a lot bigger, whereas maybe in some more pure consumer applications where there's already so many alternatives for messaging or for photo sharing, etc., that the marginal benefit from a designer tackling those problems isn't going to be as big of a contribution. So I think my answer is, like, for everyone who's listening, is like find those unsexy spaces where no designer has gone before, and you can create a ton of value, and we're really excited about those types of opportunities.
So I want to turn the conversation to investment and venture capital. You guys have all, had, I mean, that's been a part of the story for you guys, one way or the other. Can you talk a little bit about what your experience has been, particularly as a designer, acclimating yourself to venture capital, to the world, the language, the culture, and just pretend that Enrique isn't here. Go ahead.
I'm going to piggyback off what you said about being fearless. I remember the first meeting that my partner and I had with VC and thinking, wow, I'm really nervous. And then I realized, wait, no one knows how I feel inside. So I just have to act like I'm not nervous. Fake it. Like, I know it's the fake it till you make it, but not just fake it, be it. Like, just be in the conversation, and whenever I had enough bravery, I would say something and then realize the world didn't come crumbling down, and then I said something else, and next thing you knew, I'm pretty comfortable. And I think the reason I could do that was because I didn't just think, oh, I'm nervous and end of the story. I thought, why am I nervous? And it's because these people would come in with what seemed like so much wisdom and experience, and I thought, well, what can I possibly have to say in a conversation with these people that could be at all interesting to them? And so then I just tried, and I saw interest. I thought, okay, my biggest fear that I have nothing interesting to say is really unfounded. And all it took was one meeting for me to actually get comfortable with it.
And you were telling me earlier that you've since developed strategies for how to how to work with investors.
Yes.
Do you want to give us some of your secret tips?
Always laughs because every time we take any meeting, whether it's with investors or potential partners, I always orchestrate the seating arrangement because I don't want anyone who is a guest to have to do this when they're talking to us. I think you're always designing, so I'm always designing the moment for them to feel like this is a cohesive team with a great concept, and I just feel good. I feel like I want to give them some money so they can go do stuff.
How about you folks?
We explored raising a couple of years ago, and it's probably worth noting, I think you guys are all San Francisco, is that right? Yeah, and I'm in New York City, and the startup cultures are different, although recently it's finally, I think New York is getting a lot from San Francisco, but back when we did it, it was very different. There wasn't a lot of experience in New York City. There wasn't nearly as many interested parties, like startup investors doing it compared to what you guys have had access to for a while. We explored it. It was curious. We had offers. Ultimately, we decided to keep the company 100% employee owned and that's where we are right now. Every employee has equity, as the future employees will. And we're kind of taking it day by day as opposed to, not that it's, what's the rocket fuel phrase? It's like when you take investment, it's rocket fuel, either like straight to the sky or straight into the ground, right? Yeah, so we decided not to do either of those and just kind of like slowly, cautiously grow the company. But that really reflects my personality and my co-founder Adam Cornfield's personality of like one step at a time, take risks that we couldn't fail at without destroying ourselves.
So did that experience of meeting with investors, preparing a
it was
pitch
fun.
deck, did it help sort of crystallize the overall company strategy, even though you ultimately didn't
absolutely
take capital?
It helped tremendously. I created the deck. It took like 3 months to really get to a place that I liked, and it was well designed. Probably didn't need to be so designed, but I couldn't resist. And it helped me really solidify the thesis statement of the company and where we were trying to go and what we were trying to do in a very concise manner. So regardless of whether or not we ended up moving forward, the exercise was invaluable.
How about your experiences?
So we have raised, and I think the way that we did it was actually, we went through an incubator called Combinator Accelerator, whatever you want to call it, and they have an amazing, I guess, machine, if you will call it. So startups go in. I mean, we didn't have any startup or business. Actually, we had one, my co-founder Dan, he started a startup before, but we really needed that kind of kick in the pants to figure out our business plan, our revenue model, all that stuff. And then by the end, we had enough revenue and enough contracts with cities that it was easy for us to raise. And I think that momentum was helped by good storytelling and good visuals. And I think when a lot of the investors that we met with saw our product, I think their eyes lit up because they could see the possibility and, you know, the future of cities. Everyone cares about the future of cities. And so I think we were tackling a relevant problem that I think had previously been ignored by the investment community. And through, I guess, impact and revenue and storytelling, we could make the case that it was a viable business and you should get in now. I think not every investor experience was positive. I think I met a ton of investors who didn't care, you know, anything about cities or didn't care about impact. And I think when we went into fundraising, the most important part for us is we need to have our numbers down. We needed to show that impact, which is what we care about most, was directly tied to revenue, which is what investors care about at the end of the day. And so to have that story really crystal clean at the end of a 3-month accelerator was probably what gave us that rocket fuel in the beginning.
And do you guys think that having designer co-founders on your team when you talk to these investors was that well received? Was there still like you know, some reservation on the part of the investment community that, you know, these co-founders are designers? Was it positive, negative, neutral?
It was positive in the sense that we could speak to the problem we were trying to solve because it came from a design point of view. But there's also just like personality traits that are independent of the profession. Just could, I mean, anybody can have the ability to really enjoy negotiating. So a little bit.
How about you?
It was positive. It was received very positively because we sought out those types of investors that understood the value of design and true, like a brand that's really born with true intention.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was mostly positive. I do think that there was probably a few investors who saw the makeup of our team and was like, oh, there's no businessy person. There's no like MBA on the team. Like, what's that gonna be like? And I think there is a certain ethos or philosophy with investors everywhere around this concept of pattern matching, which I'm sure you've heard of. And pattern matching, for those in the audience, is like, oh, well, you look at precedents. What companies have been successful before, and what do those founders look like? And I think that homogeneity is sometimes the output of pattern matching, and I think there's probably investors out there who maybe didn't see a pattern there when we talked to them, but I think the majority of folks that we talked to saw the potential.
All right, so I'd like to wrap up here and just sort of ask, so we're like 5 years or so roughly into this concept of designer co-founders being widely accepted. It sounds like you guys all had basically positive experiences in the community. I mean, where do you think we'll be in another 5 or 10 years? And I'll start with Enrique. Like, what do you think a designer who wants to found or co-found a company in 5 or 10 years, what's the environment going to be like for them in broad strokes?
So a really good question. And to build upon what we were just talking about, on DesignerFund.com/DFG, we have a list of investors that are design friendly that we've vetted or been recommended by folks in our community. So that's a good list for you to start up, and that's free, and you can access that. And I think 5 years from now, my hope is, if we're successful with our thesis, that more spaces that traditionally have been underserved from a UX perspective will have amazing products and services out there. So, I was talking earlier with Tricia about one of our companies, Get Better, that makes it really easy for people to get reimbursements for their medical bills. Literally, there's like trillions or at least billions of dollars that insurance companies are sitting on that they have no incentive to return back to their, to people. And this company makes it super easy for you to just get your money back and processed and returned over $1 million to patients, around the country. So I'm really excited about removing these inefficiencies, these whether it's call them middlemen or whether it's bureaucratic processes or outdated technologies, and really focusing on the end customer and the human. And then the second piece that I hope for 5 years from now is that designers will be part of the founding team in helping define values and principles for the company, but they'll connect those values and principles to ethics. So design the right thing. And there's a Copenhagen letter 2017 or some initial starts of that, but you might have a value like build fast and break things, or like make it super usable, but to what end? There's not a social or an environmental ethic around that, and so I'm hopeful that designer founders will help lead the way in making sure that their values are connected to social, positive, humanistic values.
I will echo that. I'm optimistic and have observed. I'm optimistic about that trend and have observed it as well. That true designers are problem solvers at heart, and we also wish to scale. So that combination means that after creating a really great consumer product that's expected, I've seen designers in my life turn away from some shinier seeming opportunities to tackle on something that seems really hard, not glamorous, and they do it with excitement because they get to solve a problem and scale that solution. Also, another thing that I've observed is at designer meetups and at talks, designers seem to be the first ones to talk about feelings. I see entire rooms of men talking about their feelings, because as a designer you have to think about how does someone feel when they use this, when they see this. And when you talk about feelings, eventually you're going to care more and more about the world that you're in, because you can't myopically look at the bottom line. You can't myopically look at anything, because every single thing you do affects others, and that's the point. And our feedback loops are getting smaller and smaller, even with the ability for people to ask questions right now. Our feedback loops are getting smaller and smaller, so areas that were once not sexy to go into are actually really alluring, because you can talk to those users.
Where will design be in 5 years? I think design founders. I think, Enrique, you've got the macro view there. You definitely answered the question better than I could. So all I'm going to say is that I think things will continue to be more accepting and more beautiful right from the start, and that's a good thing. We'll become the baseline rather than something special. And it's interesting because it's like when a band goes mainstream and you're like, man, I really liked them when they were indie. But I mean, the band is not like, hey, I'm busting my butt here so that I can be indie. I want everybody to love me and buy my albums, right?
Right.
So same thing for us. We'll be there'll be a lot more designers and it'll be more accepted.
So the logical extension of what you're saying is like you're a rock star.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't know, is there a point where I can give one piece of advice?
Yeah, of course.
Can I do that now?
Yeah.
Cool. I would say my one piece of advice, having taught design and business at the intersection of that, and seeing how many students cannot use a spreadsheet, learn to use a spreadsheet.
That was me. I learned.
Yeah, me too. It's magical, and you can make them really beautiful, color them up so that they're kind of a design piece. But definitely learn to use spreadsheets. They're phenomenal tools.
The original killer app.
Yep, absolutely.
Tiffany, 5 years from now.
I think 5 years from now, when investors look at a founding team, they're going to be like, "Where's your designer founder?"
Ah, that would be great. All right. That was a great answer.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much to this awesome panel, and thanks to everybody who tuned in.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Khoi.
Khoi.
All right. So long. Okay, great. Thank you guys. That was great.